Hi everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for the Simon Says Stamp YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be using this stamp set called Some Bunny Special, and I'm going to be creating another mail art envelope. Starting out with the We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board. This punch board allows you to make envelopes, bows, and boxes, and I'm going to use it to make an envelope. So I'm looking up the size I need, and it says I need, for an A2 envelope, I need a paper that is 8 1/4, and I'll score at 3 5/8. So the paper I'm using is from Canson. This is a 90-pound watercolor paper, and I'm using this paper in particular because of its weight. You don't want to use a watercolor paper that's too thick because then it will be really difficult to fold and bend. So a 90-pound watercolor paper is perfect. So I've cut it to 8 1/4 square. I'm going to pull out this little extension arm on the punch board. That's going to allow me to have that score line go even farther out past the edge of the board. And I'll slide my paper in and line it up to the 3 5/8 mark on the left-hand ruler over at the top. And I'll punch once, and then I'm going to use the bone folder that comes with the punch board, and I'm scoring the paper, and it's the very first score line. So I'll go ahead and score that. And then I'm going to rotate the paper, and I'll line up that score line with that far left little notch that's coming out of the punch. Or you could just remember to go to about 4 3/4. That's usually about where it would be for this particular envelope size. So I scored and punched and then rotated again. And now I'm at the opposite side of the envelope. So once again, I'll be measuring to the 3 5/8. Or you can just line it up with that score line. And I'll score and punch. And then I'll rotate it one last time and do the same. So this is a really easy way to make an envelope. Of all the different kind of envelope makers out there, or templates or things like that, I really prefer using the We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board or the 123 punch board because it's super easy to create your envelope. So I'll put that bone folder back into the board where it can be stored, and I'll rotate the board and then use this top corner of the punch area to put a rounded edge on these pointed corners. So it's going to finish off this envelope and give it a more complete look, especially after I seal up the envelope with a card inside and all you see is that top flap. So because this is watercolor paper and I'm planning to watercolor, I'm going to go ahead and kind of fold the edges down so I get a better idea of the area that I'll be working with. And then I'm going to take some blue painter's tape and tape this envelope down to a hard surface. I'm using this hardboard here. It's very inexpensive and I use it for a lot of watercoloring projects. The watercolor paints I'm using today are from Kuretake Zig. This is the Gansai Tampi palette. There's lots of colors in the palette, lots to choose from. And the first thing I'm going to do is wet the entire surface of the front of that envelope. So I'm putting a generous amount of water down, and I'm going to let this water soak in for maybe a minute or two, just until it's not sopping wet. And then I'll bring in some color. So you can see me mixing up some of that light blue color in the palette, and I'm just going to start dropping this in. This is going to create the sky background for my scene. I'm planning to stamp the bunny and the mailbox, and I'll be painting that in eventually. But it would just be easier to completely paint the sky for the background first before coming in with the bunny. And since I'm using a very pale blue, even though I'll be painting the bunny over the top, the color really shouldn't disturb anything that I paint. So I'm not too worried about any like blue coming through or kind of messing with the colors. So there were some areas that had a little too much color, so I took a paper towel and kind of sopped it up a little bit, and then softened the edges with my paintbrush once again. I love doing skies like this with lots of water because it has a nice soft look and it looks like a great kind of cloudy sky. So I'm using my heat tool just to speed up the drying process. You could also use a hair dryer for this if you wanted to do that. I just didn't want to wait the time for it to dry on its own, but you could definitely do that. So I'm now using a little ink cube. This is Distress ink in the color Antique Linen, and I'm stamping my images in this really light yellow color because I'm going to do no-line watercoloring. And when it's no-line watercoloring, that just means that I'm purposely going to try to make the lines of the stamped image disappear. But also because of that, I have to be careful how I watercolor it. So I sped up the watercoloring process just because this clip was actually about 30 minutes long, and so I just sped it up and I thought I'd walk you through it. So when I'm doing no-line watercoloring, the thing that I try to remember in the back of my mind is that even though I'm making the lines disappear, I still want to give the suggestion of where those lines are. And sometimes you can do that with the change of color, but even more than that, I like to make sure that I have a nice kind of darker edge to each shape. I want to make sure that there's nice clean shadows and that it's really defining the outer edge of each of these shapes. So for this bunny in particular, he's reaching up and putting the envelope into the mailbox. So the arm area, I wanted to make sure is pretty defined. So I'm adding quite a bit of darker area so you know that there's another hand in behind the first one. And then I also just take a little bit of a darker shade and kind of draw in the elements of the face. If I'm doing no-line coloring with a critter or an animal of some sort, I do go ahead and kind of draw in some black lines for the face. So this bunny is kind of standing on, looks like a flower pot of some sort. So I'm eventually going to be coloring it in sort of like a rusty, burnt orange terracotta color. So I'm planning to use that for the flower pot. And then I'm also going to be adding a small element to the mailbox. I thought because I put the mailbox right up next to the bunny, and it looks like he's putting the envelope inside, that the mailbox is open. So it's supposed to have like the door of the mailbox, kind of the flap coming down. So I'll eventually add my own little mailbox opening flap that's just coming down, and then it will look like the mailbox is open. I also wanted to have little pops of red with this, so I just have red on the envelope and also some red on the flag on the mailbox. So I'll take a little bit of some green and add some grassy areas just to finish off the scene. So it gives it a little bit of grounding. And here's where I'm adding some white over top of that envelope just to define the area a little bit more. And then when I drew in that kind of flap on the mailbox. So as far as the addressing the envelope, I'm using some new brush pens from Nuvo, and I'm using the black color. And I'm going to take a pencil and just kind of draw in kind of a wavy line area. This is going to give me a guide for writing on the address. And this is going to help me so I'm not kind of just floundering and not knowing exactly where I'm writing. And then I took the brush pen and I started to write in the address. So the first line, I'm actually going to have it say, "Please deliver to." And this is just another, well, you could put that there like as like a very practical way to indicate to the postal service that this is the address you want it to be sent to, not your return address that will be on the back. So you can say, "Please deliver to," but I thought of this as an opportunity to add a little bit more of a scripty writing. So I'm adding the "Please deliver to" in a kind of a brush calligraphy style. And then for the recipient's name, I'm going to do just very simple capital letters. And I like how these aren't perfectly written. They're a little bit more whimsical. You can tell that it's handwritten. I really like that look. And after I had that done, I switched to a different pen. This is the Pilot envelope addressing pen. Simon Says Stamp is carrying it in their store, and I'm so happy about that because it's one of my favorite pens to work with, not only for envelopes like this, but also when I'm going to be doing some watercoloring, because this gel pen is actually waterproof. So it's great for things other than just addressing envelopes. So I'll write in the postal code for my recipient. And just in case any of you were wondering, this address is used with permission. It's okay to share online. So I'm not putting anyone's address on blast that I shouldn't be. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm using safe addresses for this. So I have the basic area done, so I'm going to go ahead and erase the pencil lines. And the last thing I have to worry about as far as addressing or design-wise is I need to put my return address on the top flap of the back of the envelope. So I'm going to peel off the blue painter's tape, and then I'll rotate that around and start to write my name and my P.O. box address. So I started to write my name in that same kind of cursive style or script style that I used on the front of the envelope. And then I realized that my last name wasn't going to fit using that style. So I did switch to that Pilot envelope addressing pen and used a more simple style for my last name and also the address. So I'll go ahead and put in my postal code. And this is going to be basically the entire envelope. I'm just going to add some postage and kind of fold it up. So to assemble the envelope, I'm using some adhesive tape. This is from Express It. And I'm putting it on the bottom flap nearest the edge and leaving that pointed area free from adhesive because that's going to overhang and I don't want to glue my entire envelope closed. But I do want to make sure that that adhesive is very close to the edge, and that's why I'm putting the adhesive on the bottom flap. I'll fold that up, and now I have my envelope pretty much made and ready to go for the card to go inside. I picked out 2 red postage stamps. These are some Forever stamps from the U.S. Postal Service, and I liked how the pop of red really brought out the red on the bunny's envelope and also the flag on the mailbox. So to finish this off and make sure that it's waterproof and I'm not going to have any problems if it goes to the mail, I'm using some Distress Microglaze. And what this is it's almost like the consistency of like a chapstick or a lip balm. And you use your fingertip and just add a little bit onto the surface of your project and rub it into the paper. You kind of want to buff it in with your fingers. And this provides a kind of a seal over the top of that paper, and it prevents any water from ruining your project. It's a great way to waterproof your envelopes so they can go through the mail. But I do want to caution you, only do this when you have your card completely finished or your envelope completely finished, because you will not be able to ink over the top of this. The ink will slide right off. You can't do anything on top of it. So just make sure it's completely finished. And then you'll use a paper towel to buff off any excess. So that is the monthly mail art for April. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will be back very, very soon with another mail art in about 1 month. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.